Ekirooto kyaffe eky'okukyusa Uganda empya tukituuseeko naye kino ekiwandiiko nga bakifulumizza leeti leero 27 zizino zigenda mu ssaawa 5 banaye mu commentinge Museveni must go mutaginge Donald Trump mu comment section okufaako mutambuze video singa no bagambyeko enkya nga 28 naye leero bali ku live ku Facebook banaye mugende mu commentinge Museveni must go mu comment section mweno video muteekeko Museveni must go muwanike ebipande nti Museveni must go banaye tunaatera okutuuka ku Uganda epya.
Yes, muna Uganda wena joli ennaku z'omwezi 27 olunaku olwokubiri mu mwezi ogwa January 2026. Ekyo kifaananyi ky'olaba ku screen yo dictator yakafugira emyaka 40 naye yanyaga obuwanguzi bwaffe nakola effujjo lyonna ng'alinga atafugangako lwaki lwa mululu. Naye nkulayira muna Uganda ssaawa eno bannaffe bangi aba NUP banji balira ku nsiko bannaffe bangi bekwese ne kati ffe abavaayooko ne twogerayogerako oko tebalina busobozi buli onateekayo eddoboozi ly'omunnange liba lina kye likolayo liba lina kye liyamba. Kati ono omusajja golaba dictator emyaka 40 ensi eddabuzi mabega naye kulayira muna Uganda bagenda kukwatira omuntu. Njagala nnyo buli wobeeraawo ogobera ebigambo bya His Excellency Kyagulanyi Ssentamu President waffe ng'akuba campaign byazaayogera yagamba olunaku lumu bagenda kukwatira omuntu jeeke. Yagamba muna Uganda olunaku lumu mugenda kusanyuka mugenda kulinya ennyonyi mugenda sala ticket mukomewo mu nsi yammwe mugenda kusanyuka buli kimu tulina okikola tulina okukabanja abasindika message nga musindika United States of America nga musindikira UK muzisindike mwongeremu amaanyi amakungula gajja ono omusajja bagenda mukwata jeeke bana Uganda mugenda kusanyuka mugenda kweyagala n'ekindi ogamba kiri kimu mmwe aba NRM ekibuzo kye njagala obabuuza kiri kimu dictator bamujjako ng'avuddeko agenze ne kabineti ye yonna bano bannabbanja banitamogi bonna mugenda kumugoberera. Ekibuzo kye mbuuza bebeku banasi mugenda baddawa religious council but religious leaders banasi mugenda baddawa bano abeefudde mu lubiri lwa kabaka banasi mugenda baddawa mwe bakabaka be bawamba ne musirika bwe muti ng'ensonga eno egenda maaso banasi mugenda baddawa gwa waddawagira NRM banasi mugenda baddawa siribagamba basirikale siribagamba ki naye banasi mugenda baddawa kuba balina obusungu bungi era gwe nange okimanyi tubadde wa NRM yadde wayiseemu ze kukakasa banasi bakambwe simanyi gye mugenda kubadda eva president azabagamba His Excellency Kyagulanyi Ssentamu babakozesa mukola nsobi naye nga temuwulira notasanga minister omu bamukozesa ensobi nenatalizayininga nosanga ba office Owinyiddolo sayino bakajja bawummule naye ng'ebyo byakoze bingi. Lwaki Owinyiddolo bamuyimiriza oluvannyuma lw'okukayanira ettaka eryali mu Northern bwe bali ne ba Robert Mao office Owinyiddolo ebamuwummuliza kati bazze bakyatudde essaawa eno bamanyi nti office Owinyiddolo emyaka ejagwa mu 2021 yagoba omusango gwa His Excellency Kyagulanyi Ssentamu n'ayisaawo President Museveni dictator kati bamuwummuza n'essaawa eno yadde bamuwummuza era akyali mu buwambe. Bamanyi kati sawo nayinza ofulumya obujulizi era kati bamulina bamukutte nga balaba Rebecca Katwala Kadaga bwe bamutekako obukuumi obwo ne office Owinyiddolo waali lwaki obujulizi era sawa yonna oyinza okiwira nti office Owinyiddolo bamusse. Bano baani Electoral Commission wa EC byabakama sawa yonna naye ojja kuwira nti bamusse. Bana basajja bamala okukozesa nga bakutta bino bimukiibi bino waliwo nekyafanda ekirala ekyali awo nga kyogerayogera byonna bisajja bikozesa ensobi bagenda bita naye bannansi mugenda baddawa era kyemulina okukola kuva mu ggwanga kugenda mawanga malala naye bannansi stiru bakambwe dictator newavaako ne tumuggyako president newatula ku ntebe bannansi bakambwe eri mu abantu ba NRM kuba Museveni asse nga akozesa mmwe. Bannayuganda tugenda mu Uganda mpya.
And welcome to this show. Again, I'm with the Bruce Afram, a constitutional lawyer, and actually is a lawyer in the case involving Museveni, his son, and very many others at the International Criminal Court. Bruce, first say hi to everyone watching us, and then we get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. JB has a great show, and it's good to be talking to you all.
Thank you. By the way, we are glad to have you again.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Getting started, can you provide an overview of the case that you and your team are handling at the International Criminal Court? Because very many would love to know that.
Yes. Well, as you know, JB, we filed the case in the summer, and the court acknowledged receiving our materials. We submitted 215 affidavits from witnesses who have said they saw or they were a part of torture in the various detention centers, mostly So we have hundreds of people who have testified in the Special Forces Command as to the torture that they have experienced. And this is unusual because usually one brings a case to these forums asking for investigation, but we're now coming to them with more than 200 witnesses, many of whom detail very graphic and brutal acts by the Special Forces Command and other people in the government. And we even have 4 people who testify that they themselves were confronted with Muhoozi, the general's son, at these torture centers, and he was in command and was fully aware of what they went through and was commanding these detention centers. So we have witnesses who said Muhoozi is the person running these torture centers, and we have over 200 people who explain how they were brutalized. So we have a very strong case we've made for the ICC. Now, they have to decide whether they take the case, you know. They're prosecutors and they investigate, but we've given them the strongest evidence we can. And they're going to take time. It's not a quick process.
Yes, having said that, could you elaborate on how the International Criminal Court interacts with the institutions such as the police, the army? How does the International Criminal Court interact with the police department and other security organizations when it comes to abductions and other disruptions aimed at dissenting voices? Can the entire department be held accountable at the ICC, or they have to deal with the individuals personally?
Well, what happens is individuals are charged by the ICC. The ICC is a court that deals with people. The International Court of Justice deals with countries. But the ICC brings charges against people. So they can bring charges against General Museveni, his son, you know, Mr. Ananga, other people who have participated in running torture centers, and they can bring charges against individual officers or soldiers who have done these things. And when they come to a country, they set up an office, and all of the governmental offices must cooperate because there's a treaty. And Uganda has signed the treaty of the court. And when the court comes to Uganda, Uganda's government must cooperate. So what the court will do, JB, is it will come in and will interview those witnesses we have. And then it may decide to interview police and government officials. But normally a government is required to cooperate with the ICC because it's a treaty and that's the law.
Actually, ever since His Excellency Bobi Wine and his team managed to drag Museveni and his son, of course, and those others you mentioned, there has been some bit of an atmosphere, you know, that gripped Museveni's camp. They are not settled. And actually, that's why His Excellency Bobi Wine managed to embark on a national tour, opening, of course, under the National Unity Platform. But of course, after the first phase, as if we are witnessing a change of winds, whereby police is now trying to come up with statements seemingly blocking him from continuing with the tour. Are you aware of this, and what does this speak to you?
You know, it's interesting, JB. The government came up with that only on the last day of the tour. So once the tour, the government said, oh, we're stopping it. But they were afraid to stop it beforehand. So they only say we're going to stop it after it ended. They were afraid while it was going on to stop it. Now, you all saw those huge crowds, 20,000 at minimum, sometimes 50 or 100,000 people. Entire towns were filled with people, stadiums. The government no longer will dare to use violence against those people. Because if they kill people, if they gun them down, if they're beating them in front of cameras, then the ICC will indict. And so the government is now understanding it can no longer use raw, naked violence against these people who come to hear Bobi Wine. And the government knows that. And that's why they announced they're stopping the tour only on the last day, after it's all over. So they're trying now to come up with excuses why not to let Bobi go again on tour. But they're making up stories that are very weak. They're saying, well, towns were crowded, stores had to close. There was traffic accidents. These aren't the statements of a government that thinks it's all powerful anymore. These are the statements of a government looking to make excuses. So it remains to be seen whether they're going to be able to stop a future tour. What are they going to do when these tens of thousands of people come out to see Bobi? They can't gun them down, and the soldiers won't do that anymore. They can't beat them up with sticks in front of cameras because then they'll be indicted. So now the government is in a tough position. It can't really block these protests. If it does, the officials in the government get indicted. So they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. This is the force of law. Law, even the threat of law, makes governments behave better.
The way you are putting it out, it's like your cameras and lenses are still squarely focused on Museveni. Isn't the 215 evidence enough? You seem like you need more evidence in order to, back up the case. Is it the case?
Well, I think that we have enough evidence to make the International Criminal Court say there is a case here to investigate. Remember, our job at this early stage in the case is only to show the court there's enough here that the court should come in and investigate. Then the court will do its own inquiry. So our job is only to give the court a taste of what's out there, to show the court that there's enough that has happened, enough torture, enough brutalization that the court should launch the investigation. I think we've shown enough for that. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think we've done more than most cases do when they first come to the ICC. But remember, JB, it takes the court time. All judicial processes take time. And the court's going to take many months to go over this evidence. But in that time, the government now has to behave itself. Because if it uses violence and torture in public, at least, and guns people down or beats them in protests, then the court is absolutely going to act. So the government now has to be on its best behavior. Now we're seeing the results. People are no longer afraid to come out. Look at all those huge crowds that were no longer scared. They were no longer afraid of General Museveni. This tells us what the rule of law can do. And I think people in the government also, in the NRM, are starting to understand that all of this violence has to come to an end. That this way of running Uganda is old and has to change. And so I think we've made a lot of progress. Those huge rallies are a sign of that.
Having talked about the 215 that they are enough to make the case, the last time we were here, actually after the show, very many Ugandans were actually in need to know how safe is this evidence, these affidavits at the ICC.
JB, let me say this. The Internet very seriously the need to keep things confidential and to keep them secret. When someone signs an affidavit to the court, that does not ever get disclosed by the court. And in any communications, the court uses a code to deal with these affidavits. When a person signs a statement to the International Criminal Court, that statement is secret, it is confidential. The one guiding principle that the court has is absolute privacy. People are free to communicate to the court, and it will never disclose that information to the government of Uganda. That is an absolute. And everything you send to the court is safe. And let me tell you this, if people send statements to us, to the NUP, to me directly in America through the email, those statements are also safe. We will safeguard those, and when we send them to the ICC, they are kept secret.
Bino bibaite ebyennaku ebisekerwa Esaawa zino Museveni ekigunju kye kimutuddemu. Ekigunju kimufuukidde ekigunju kyagala kumussa. Omaye Museveni amanyi kitegeeza we bayogera ku super power. Yakimanyi bulungi ne kati ono omwana okuba yanywa omwenge ate natural obwongo butono ali denzi. Agamazima ka Katonda muggulu siri mu kuvuma muwozi. Simuvuma vuye muwozi musiru. Kya butonde naye tiyayagala. Tiyayagala musajja tunagala okuba omugezi n'ebigaana bugaanyi. Muwozi agezaako okukola buli kyasobola kyonna okubeera omusajja omugezi ne Justin nekyayemu tamukkiriza. Abaguka abuguma muwozi abuguma muwozi no kiba kiyenje ng'akirina kakisenso kikwata nga kyamuvumya akinona. Talinga bakulembeza aberekereza nti oyo kamuleko oyo tamatalinga oyo tagasa buli omu amwanukula. Tayina kasunsula. Bula nti abantu bali bagamba muze sisengejja bigambo sisunsula mu kyenje tsanga kyenjogera. Muwozi kyasanga kyonna kyayogera kasabeera nga yawulira omutwe guzitoye. Abategedde mutegedde. Tayina kasengejja. Doge mazima. Kwa statement zako nange nenja lenga muwozi ogambye eki Amerika jaji kuba obo oli awo ngaalumbye omwana ono bannango kale unya n'emyaka 5 mu ne tumuyita mwana olw'ebikolwa bye byakola ebyekito kati nno lyo taata wa mukomyeko President Museveni ategezeza muwozi mutabani we taddamu kwogerezeganya to communicate kintu kyonna ku online oba TikTok oba X ngarase kumwebuuzaako emabega ka omuwozi abadde apostinga ku X ye ngabo yatta abantu none etamena repercussion tamanyi na repercussion yo bongo mugamba fa balina obuyinza fa balina amaanyi fe bakirimanyi teri atusobola fe buli kimu ne Museveni akimanyi tekitegeeza kuba Museveni aludde nga abatta nenga abibikirira ali mu kwewuunya ekitabani kyo kivo ne kikyewaniramu namutegeeza mbuyatta abantu bangi era alirwedde okukapchalinga n'okutta Bobi Wine opposition leader kati International Criminal Court ya Hague eyisiza arrest warrant ku bombi ne Museveni kati agambye omutabani kwegeridde tondetera bizibu tonda mukubaako statement yonna gyoyoge ku mubufunze muwozi bamujjako eddembe ly'okweyogerera